So Sam and I just watched We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is a 2011 movie starring Tilda Swinton, John C. Reilly, and Ezra Miller. And it is a really, it's a thriller. And if you haven't seen this movie, I'm not going to spoil anything, and you probably won't watch it ever just because it's in the past. But you should. If you ever come across it and you're looking for something that's kind of dark, a little twisted, but it's good. It's a really kind of artistic movie, but it's essentially about a mother who has this like evil child that hates her and manipulates her from, a baby all the way up into the very end of the movie. And as dark and twisted as it is, it's kind of funny. The reason I watched this movie in Colorado up to about the halfway point, and then I forget why I wasn't able to finish it, but I loved it, and I really wanted to finish it, and it took me, so many years, over 10 years to finally get back to it. And one of the reasons that it stayed fresh in my mind is because I always wanted to bring this movie up to Sam because she had never seen it, because like there's these moments at the beginning, and it's like, she has this baby, and the baby will not stop crying like endlessly. But then around the dad, he's like this sweet little baby, and then he gives it back to her, and he's like horrible. And this goes on till he's a toddler. He just does all these things intentionally or seemingly intentionally to torture the mother, but is this, into the dad's eyes, is the sweetest little boy who says I love you and all this, but to the mom it like destroys all of her stuff, and it is intentionally not potty training until a super old age. He does all these things and blames her, and it's like this really, really intense kind of question of how far can a child push their mother's love. And of course that's super extreme, but as a parent, you just kind of have to laugh at this stuff where, there's these little micro scenarios where your child's just giving their mother hell. And then, there was a lot of anecdotal stuff that I wanted to bring up to it. Anyways, we watched it again, and I had forgotten really how artistic the movie is. And it's a nice, it's really palatable in terms of there's a lot of symbolism, and it jumps around a lot between beginning and end, like the past and the current. But it does it very clearly. It communicates very well where we are in the timeline, what the movie is saying or what's happening and what the characters are feeling. So it's not like a bunch of interpretive symbolism. It's just a lot of creative use. And the two things that are striking to me is this wonderful use of sort of red, blue, and yellow. Red representing like this evil that's in her life, and so there's red in like every single shot, and then blue that's kind of like this Zen moments, and then yellow, which is sort of her fighting back against the horrors that she's experiencing in her life. And long story short, Ezra Miller's character, the son, eventually kills a bunch of students at his school, and so that like projects, even though he goes into prison, the mother's life is still horribly tortured by the public, blaming her for raising this child terribly. And it's just like it goes from her husband being like, you were just being super unfair to our child, he's done nothing wrong, there's something wrong with you, to the whole public being like, you've done something wrong to this child to cause him to do this. But of course, from her perspective, it's like, no, Kevin, this child is evil. And I also kept thinking back to an interview that I watched with one of the mothers of the murders from the Columbine shooting. And it was really fascinating because it was years and years later, and her husband had divorced, and she talks about how it ruined her life and how they've received death threats and this complicated way where she didn't feel like she loved her child anymore. And it was horribly, horribly sad. But I feel like this movie sort of plays around with that idea of again, how far can a child push a mother's love, and is there a breaking point? Which seems like a very obvious question, but this is the only movie that I can recall that does it so directly. I think The Babadook is very similar, which is another horror movie where this child is like kind of evil and driving this mother crazy. But anyways, the other thing other than color use in this movie that I really appreciated was the use of sound was super great. there's not a ton of music. All the music is pretty lighthearted, but using Foley, like the sound of a sprinkler or lots of sounds of power tools, it just gives this very loud and sort of sense of anxiety. And so you're feeling her anxiety a lot of times through the Foley or the audio. And it's really quite well done. I have to really tip my hat to this movie because I think it's a little underrated in terms of, I think the movie probably people may have, if you make a movie of a certain caliber, like in terms of being artistic, the reception is to treat it like a piece of this very fine art. But I don't necessarily think that this movie's trying to be that. I think it's just trying to really explore this idea as uniquely and creatively as possible, because the source material is a novel. This is based off of a book. I have no knowledge of how accurately it follows the book or where it might divert or what ideas are the directors or the authors, whatever. But yeah, good movie. It's a little bit disturbing, nothing crazy. There's a couple things that are sort of hard to watch conceptually. Nothing visually gory, I would say, out of the ordinary. But the tone is it kind of comes from sort of it makes me think of Donnie Darko, this sort of like, twisted 90s, early thousands sort of troubled youth kind of a thing, which is cool. Performances are amazing by Tilda Swinton. I believe she won an Oscar for best. I'd have to go back and look, but I remember something like that. So anyways, I would give this movie a solid 8 out of 10. It's I hate to use the word fun watch because it's not really like fun in that sense, but it's a good watch. It's fun. I mean, it's an enjoyable movie, and I think it's worth watching if you're into that sort of thing, if you're into kind of, some sort of disturbing dark stuff. So yeah, we need to talk about Kevin. Good movie. 8 out of 10.